Welcome to a psychiatrist's take on the Bible. This podcast does not provide psychiatric, medical, or professional advice, opinion, treatment, or counseling. It contains general information for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for psychiatric, medical, or professional care. It does offer a unique "so what" take on the Bible of a board-certified psychiatrist who is also an ordained minister.
I've planned to do a series on the concept of depression, and this will be the first. And what I'm going to talk about in the first one is sin versus sickness. Which one is it? The answer, I believe, is yes, no, maybe. There is an important thing that happens when people struggle with sin and sickness. You go to one group of people and they'll say, oh, it's just sin. Anyone who struggles with depression must be worse. They have to have done something bad. This represents the counselors that came to Job in the Old Testament. They said, hey, Job, you got to have done something wrong, or you wouldn't be suffering. Now just fess up, and then you will be like we are because we haven't sinned and we're doing well. And God got pretty mad at them, saying, you've told Job things in my name that just aren't so. And the truth is, Job was probably the most righteous man on the planet. But he had been through a lot. Physical suffering, tiredness, great loss. And yeah, he was pretty down in the dumps. He said that he wanted his day in court. He wanted to find out what God was up to. It's interesting that this is the first book in the Bible. It's older by 1,000 years than Moses when he wrote Genesis. So the first thing that the Bible seems to say about depression and struggle is it doesn't happen to you because you're worse than anyone else. And it doesn't happen to you because God is angry at you. I remember a lady I worked with up in Anchorage, Alaska, who struggled with severe depression. And every medicine we tried failed. We finally found one that worked. And we were so happy. And then it got pulled off the market because of some bad reactions over in Europe. They didn't even allow the people who were already doing well to continue. Back into the depression. She called me up and she said, Dr. Bell, does this mean that God is angry at me? Have I caused this? All I ask is that he either take away the depression so I can serve him, or use me to bless others in spite of the depression. Her attitude was good. She just wanted to serve God. And I think that's typical of people who burn out. It's not the people who sit in the back row. It's not the people who think they're okay that burn out. It's the people who see the mess of life and the world around them, who care deeply, who try valiantly. These are the people that burn out. I don't want them to learn to quit seeing, quit caring, and quit trying. I want them to be able to do that without burning out. And the secret, of course, lies in the grace of God. So she called me up a week later and she said, well, I'm still depressed, but this week God used me to lead a friend to salvation and to talk another friend into not getting a divorce but going for counseling instead. He's using me mightily. Does that mean he'll never take away my depression and just use me to help others? I told her I didn't know, but that at least God was using her the way she asked. When she came to the point in her life where God was sovereign and could do it either way, take away the depression, or at least use her to bless others, with the depression in place, she calmed down in the midst of the depression, and it didn't surprise me that the next thing we tried worked for her. The Bible points out that pretty much anyone God used in the Bible in a mighty way went through a spell of depression. I mean, just look at them. There's David. Read the Psalms. They're just full of a man struggling with depression, who was a man after God's own heart, a man of passion. He loved God in his ways, but often he would get burned out. It's interesting that when Charles Spurgeon went through a 3-year spell of depression, he was taken by the Lord to read the Psalms and write about them. And he found in them much comfort because David had been in the same place before, tossing and turning on his bed at night and unable to sleep, but found God to be faithful in the midst of it. Moses, overburdened by the task of carrying all those people through the wilderness, said, God, did I give birth to all these people? Why did you do that? Why don't you just kill me and get me out of this? Elijah said the same thing. In fact, when I talk to my patients, I call it the Elijah suicide, where we say, God, why don't you just kill me? I think if you do that, you'll live to 105. And I remember one lady, she was depressed. She was old. She was weak. She couldn't see. She couldn't walk. She could barely hear. And she had hallucinations all day long. Nothing took them away. She kept telling God, Lord, why don't you just take me home? Just take me home. Get rid of these voices or take me home. Finally she said, Lord, you don't have to get rid of the voices. You don't even have to take me home yet. Just allow me to reach out and bless others. And when she focused on ministry to her caregivers, I wasn't surprised that a week later, God took her home. I think you'll live forever if you keep telling God to take you home. And that's what Elijah did. Now we can understand why he was depressed. First he was worn out from calling down fire from heaven and bringing rain up out of the ocean and running in front of the chariot. And then he took a little credit for all that. That seems to be one of the elements of burnout. And I find that there are two kinds of people in this world, naturally. There are the people who don't burn out because they don't see, they don't care, and they just find great excuses and blame everybody else. Then there are the people who do see, do care, and burn out. If you're depressed, that's probably you. Decent people. In addition, they tend to blame themselves for all the problems, take upon themselves the suffering. I'm going to suffer for my kids' sake. I'm going to suffer for other people's sake. They never want to be a burden, but all of these things tend to wear us out. Decent people, needing to get to the end of themselves. Look at church history. There's Hudson Taylor. God wanted to take religion from the coast and spread it inland. And in China, he knew communism was coming, and all the missionaries huddled in the little towns along the coast which were owned by the Europeans. Hudson, no. He was going to take the message into the middle of the country. He grew a queue on the back of his head like the local people wore their garb, learned their ways, and went to the people. And he burned out, had to go back to England, a broken man. And when walking on the beach, God said to him, the problem here is that although you love me, you love my ways, you love my word, you love my people, the problem is you're the one doing the work. Back off. I'd build my church. It was then that he found peace, and God was able to use him without wearing him out. John Wesley came over to this country, a decent man, reaching out to teach and be a missionary to the Indians. One day the children with shoes were making fun of the children without shoes. So John Wesley went as a teacher without shoes. But in spite of all this hard work and trying to be godly, he burned out, went back to England a broken man. Martin Luther struggled mightily with depression. At the end of a bout of depression, he wrote the hymn, "A Mighty Fortress is Our God," sang it at the devil, and found some relief. I think it's almost a prerequisite. If you could stand back and look at all the Christians in the world and wonder, which one of these is God going to use to do a mighty work? Which one of these is pleasing to Him? Which one of these are in a position for God to use? It wouldn't be the people who feel fine because they're sitting in the back row. It would be the people struggling with depression. These are the ones that see the need, care, and try. So, I guess I'm arguing that if you struggle with depression, maybe it's a blessing. But then we need to move beyond and find an end to ourselves and find the strength we need to climb out. In my next podcast, I'm going to talk a little bit more. When a person comes to me with depression, what are the different things that could cause that? And how do we check those out? And then I'll go on to talk about, well, what can we do to fight back against the depression? So, if you find this helpful, please tell your friends and pass this podcast on and see if God wants to increase this ministry. May God richly bless you.